Hello and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. You know, when we think about the soul of business, it's almost like the phrase compassionate capitalism. In many people's minds, it's an oxymoron. It's kind of because most people don't experience businesses as having, what we might generically and colloquially call a soul, which for a lot of people in their thinking has to do with something that's living, vibrant, and gives a sense of solace, gives a sense of belonging, those sorts of things. Some of the attributes of soul. Carl Jung, once said that everything does have a soul. In animate and inanimate objects have souls, from his perspective. And the Greeks used to call the soul, that the animating force of everything. I mean, that's the very generic, paraphrasing of what the Greeks were referencing. And I'm mentioning this for a very specific reason. My guest today is the CEO of one of the oldest law firms in the country, one of the largest. Top. They're actually in the grouping of, I think they're the 65th or 66th largest law firm in the country. Got over 1,300 employees working with it, law offices everywhere, particularly in the South. And I'm mentioning this because when people think of law, when they think of particularly attorneys and law offices, soul doesn't usually come up in the conversation. This one is different, and this is the reason that I wanted to have Tim on the show. Tim Lupinacci is the CEO of Baker Donelson, and Baker Donelson's 130 years old as a firm. The term Baker, in the Baker Donelson title here, the Baker that's referenced there is Howard Baker. And if you have any sense of American history, Howard Baker is quite the icon, not just in the legal profession, but from a number of other social arenas here. There was a soul involved in the way that Howard worked. So that is kind of my preface here. Tim, I want to welcome you to the show again, folks. It's Tim Lupinacci. He's the CEO and the chair at Baker Donelson. So welcome to the show.
Blaine, I am really excited to be here. I mentioned to you previously, I've gained a lot of value already from listening to your podcast and reading some of your resources. So I'm just honored to be here and talking about the soul as it relates to law and Senator Baker and leadership.
Well, we'll talk less about Senator Baker, I think, and more about you specifically here. But I just want to frame a context with this. And I hope I wasn't too far off just in terms of the generic assumption that people have about law firms, not possessing necessarily a soul. So when you think of the soul of business, what comes to mind when you think of the soul of business?
Yeah, and I think it is a real differentiator, and I agree with your generic synopsis of probably what most people think about the legal profession and law firms. A lot of that, I think, is because we're hired to be zealous advocates, and so we're litigating and advocating for our clients within ethical realms and things like that. But as a business proposition, and law firms have certainly in the last couple decades really grown into the business of law. I think one of the things that's really been a real differentiator for us at Baker Donelson, and something I passionately believe in, is this idea that we're driven by our people, and having our people have a voice, have a seat at the table, that we're better together. I'm not at all, and law firms really generally aren't this hierarchical structure where you send it down and say you got to go do this. We're a very flat organization. Our biggest rainmakers can walk out the door to another firm given almost any day with their clients. I mean, not exclusively like that, but I mean, you've got to have people that you get buy-in, support, and collaboration in the vision you're trying to do. And when I became CEO 5 years ago, we had an introductory kind of town hall. And one of my key principles that's guided my whole life is that everyone in the firm is a leader. And, we have shareholders who have drive the bigger books of business, et cetera. But we can't serve our clients, be trusted advisors with our clients, unless everybody is executing at their highest level in their particular role in the firm. And that includes the person that, the receptionist and the paralegal, the young lawyer, the business professional who knows how to, our CFO has some talent and skills that law degree they don't teach you. So the whole idea of people being the heartbeat of who we are as a firm really drives us and drives me. I tell our colleagues we've got some ambitious finance goals and financial goals and things we're trying to accomplish to remain competitive. But what gets me up every morning is because our people and wanting to help them achieve some level of progress towards their pathway of success and purpose in what they're doing. And I think that's the soul of Baker Donelson is if we can accomplish that. So I totally
Yeah.
love what you do, Blaine, because it's spot on in my view.
Oh, Tim, well, thank you for saying so. I'm struck with, your statement here. Everybody's a leader, and I know you've got a new book that's being put together, essentially around that same title, and I'm looking forward to reading it when it goes to press. But how did you come to? And by the way, I completely agree with you. Everybody's a leader. Not
Right,
everybody's effective in that
right.
capacity, but everybody's a leader. How did you come to recognize what I think is a fundamental truth?
I mean, it really came out of a failure as a young lawyer. I don't know, I didn't know a lot of lawyers. I didn't intend to set out to go to law school. I literally kind of stumbled into it just the way things fell out. And so now I'm at a law firm, I'm practicing, and I viewed it very transactionally. I got a project from my boss, I would finish it, I would turn it in, I'd go to the next project. And I'm still trying to figure out, do I belong here? I got a little bit of the imposter syndrome, and I have a really rough boss who could, yell a good bit. And so it was always like, you don't want to get called to his office. Well, I was working on a big project with somebody who was about 5 years my senior, and then we got the whole project, turned it in. I went on to my next project, and a few hours later, we both got paged to the boss's office. He was on a phone call with about a dozen lawyers from across the country. And then I'm sitting there listening. I realized that we had messed up the project. We had double counted some of the financial information, and so the calculations were wrong. And we're heading to a big court hearing the next day. I was bankruptcy, trying to restructure all this debt, and we didn't have the right amount of debt. And so he starts yelling
Whoops.
at us, and saying these idiots are going to stay here all night to get it right. And, I'm sitting there thinking I'm going to lose the job, and I don't even know. I was really worried, but we did stay there. We got it right. We figured out what we had done. We emailed it out to everyone, and I had drawn the short straw to pick up the boss to drive to court the next morning. And so I get him. It was a very awkward silence driving. I'm in Birmingham. We were driving to Montgomery. A lot of silence. And then all of a sudden, then he paused and he apologized to me. He said, I shouldn't have yelled in front of other lawyers, but I was so aggravated with you in particular because I really see leadership skills in you. I see in you someone who can really succeed in what you're doing, but you got to step up and own your career, and you got to not worry about that the other person was 5 years your senior. You need to get this right. And I really don't remember having like someone speaking leadership into me, and I didn't
Uh-huh.
view myself as a leader. I was just a young lawyer trying to figure this out. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to be better as a leader, I got to figure out what it means and how can I get better. And that led to sort of my self tutorial to become a better leader by reading about it and learning about it. So really, that was something that just stuck with me. That I didn't have a title, I didn't have a big corner office, but I could step up my leadership and have greater impact. So that's what led me on this journey of 30 some years now.
I love the story because it's organized around what a lot of people would consider to be a failure, and it wasn't. I mean, you mitigated the consequence. You
Right,
fixed it,
right. Yes.
um, but the damage to the ego, the damage to at that point in time, all the other stuff that kind of came along with that. A lot of people would have collapsed the tent and said, "That's boy, I." And that's not what you did. There's an interesting thing there. Now you grew up in Philly, if I recall.
Right, right. Yeah.
So I'm going to go back in time here a little bit because that's kind of Warren Bennis would call that a crucible moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that moment.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of forges something, but you need raw material to forge with. Yeah, if you're going to go into a smelting
Yeah.
conversation, what are you bringing into the table here? So take us back. How did you begin? And you may not have had the language that
Right.
organized it this way, but how did you begin to learn about being a leader?
Yeah, it's a
Going way
great
back.
question, Blight. No, it's a great question, and I really do like a lot of self-reflection and thinking about that because I think it informs us to then where we are today, right? Well, my father had grown up in a very poor family, did a bunch of graduated from one of the Penn State satellite colleges in engineering, hated it, ended up doing a bunch of odd jobs, And then he decided his real calling was to go to medical school. So he did some night courses to figure that
Wow.
out. And by that point, I mean, I'm like in kindergarten. And then he decided, I kind of call it, from It's a Wonderful Life, his George Bailey moment. He wanted to go see the world. So he
Yeah.
applied to all these international medical schools so that he could come back to the United States and practice. And so we went to, family of four, moved to Guadalajara, Mexico for 4 years while he did that. And I think a lot of watching, I mean, his curiosity, trying to learn and grow and to try to achieve something that he really had a desire that he wanted to be a doctor somewhere that was in him. And just see him persevere in the hard work of that. His father had his own machine shop. I always saw him working like way too many hours and really stressful. And I bet some of it, I take some of that and I've learned how to do better about, balance and making sure I'm taking care of Tim and, mental health, wellness. And we could talk about that too. But I think a lot of watching my father do that, launching a new career, all the, the stress and pressure, but then to actually execute and find more career satisfaction, that had to have been some of this inner sense of really drive within me, even though I didn't really know how to put words around it, as you said.
Yeah. I'm always fascinated by people's stories about
Yeah,
the historical piece is, we can make anything out of any story.
right, right.
and and what's fascinating to me about that is it's always a function of choice. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I may have been locked in the glove box when I was, 6 months old and, just
right,
kind of,
right.
boy, that was horrible. Or, hey, that was kind of interesting. I got to spend some time with myself and I learned a whole lot of stuff. I can go either direction with that. Leaders, in my experience, and I've worked with a lot of them, as have you, that seem to excel are ones that have taken, and this is back to Warren's crucible moment here. They've taken the adversity. Yeah, he wrote an article. Forget what the name of it was. It's in the Harvard Business Review, and I think it was 2002. I think it was published,
Hmm,
but it had to do with this notion of the crucible. And they were looking at what seemed to set leaders apart, highly effective leaders. Everybody's a leader, but
right,
some aren't effective. Yeah, the
right.
effectiveness. And one of the key components was what they ended up calling adaptive capacity.
Hmm,
Yeah, the ability to adapt to whatever life throws at me, and adapt not from the sense of just kind of folding my tent and hoping that it goes away, but how can I use this? How can I use
right.
this? When you took over as CEO 6 years ago, what were some of the things
Huh.
that you needed and the firm needed to adapt to
Yeah,
that
that's a great
have really
question.
served you well?
Well, and it's a great question, and it really has impacted to who I am today. We had had we had about 15 years of sustained growth as a firm, but about the 5 years prior to became when I became CEO, we had pretty much stagnated. We'd plateaued. I think we had not made the big pivot into thinking like a business. It was more sort of the handshake partnership type approach, which is
Mm-hmm.
valuable, but there's a lot of best run business principles that we just weren't following. And so when I was in my transition, we had our worst fiscal year ever, year end, in the middle of my transition. So I came in a little bit in a crucible right off the bat. And this is 2019. And then we had a little bit of a pickup right at the initial part. We had a big kickoff retreat, and people were excited about some new vision. But then it just was going down again. And we got to mid year of that fiscal year, my first, and we were looking like we were going to be down again. And so that was another sort of let's get together as a leadership team and we really have to execute. That whole it's an overused phrase about don't let a crisis go to waste. We had to do it because we had key colleagues who could go, make more money elsewhere if we didn't get this fixed. And actually, this little crystal thing that's right behind me is something when we were able
Uh,
to turn that year around and we got some 6 months of momentum. We finished up on share value after we looked like we were going to be down for a second year in a row. We turned it around. And it was through a Herculean effort of our leadership team. I did these little crystal things I gave out just to remember. It's like a stone of remembrance in the hardest times. If we come together as a team, leadership team, as a firm, we can turn this together and make this work. So it's been a good reminder, but then we get this 6 months of, good trajectory. We're feeling good. And then COVID hit. So another crucible. Of course, none of us, it was all the uncertainty. We ended up like a lot of professional services firm having record years because you had a lot of cost savings from everything, but you just didn't know. And so I say all that to say I feel a little bit like it's been in the crucible from day one, but it's helped And my background in practice was corporate bankruptcy, and so I think that really did. I love your thinking about like what prepares you for where you are. In corporate bankruptcy, nobody's happy. I've mostly represented the banks, so we're trying to collect our money, but the company's in trouble, and you have to come around. And you can go to court and litigate, and they spend a lot of money. But the best thing is to try to come around and how can we collaborate and fix this together. So anyway, I do think that's I totally love that idea of coming through the crucible and resilience. I've learned a lot of resilience, and I think that's a key business trait for sure.
I love the way that you frame that. We're going to take a real quick break. When we come back, what I want to do is, if you're open to it here, unbundle the notion that a lot of people have about law being an adversarial practice. And you had mentioned something earlier about early in your career, you approached it as a transactional dynamic rather than a relational. And you didn't say this, but the antithesis of transactional is relational. So that's almost an oil and water sort of a thing, adversarial and relational. My guess is you've been pretty good at kind of squaring the circle, if you will, in that sense, to where you're honoring the practice of law, which is advocacy for your client, but it's also not in the context of unnecessary adversary. There's a relational dynamic to it. And I want to just kind of explore how you've managed to pull that trick out of the hat when we come back. Okay. So, folks, we're listening and having I think, a fascinating, or at least for me, conversation with Tim Lupinacci, CEO of Baker Donelson, and we will be right back after this short message. The nature of life is evidenced in nature. Nature grows, and all of nature honors the desire to be more, to have more, and to do more. Life thrives when it's allowed to grow. And ideally, thriving is what we also, all of us, want to be able to do. Unfortunately, at some stage in life, most people find themselves settling into what I can only call a rut. And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with the ends kicked out. You want to quickly get out of any rut that you find yourself in. When you stop growing, that's when the coffin starts to appear. The simple truth is this, and this is true for everything in nature. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Every one of us dies. So the question we need to come to grips with is not, are we going to die? The question nature asks us to answer is, are we truly living? That's what motivation is about. It's the desire to move. It's the desire to grow and to excel. Have I lived? How have I lived? I'd love for you to take advantage of my Leadership Mindset Masterclass. It's all about providing you with the tools to ensure thriving for yourself and for those around you. Register today to receive the free introduction video and find out more about this acclaimed program. You'll also receive a copy of my international #1 bestseller, Compassionate Capitalism, A Journey to the Soul of Business. I'm Blaine Bartlett, and I look forward to helping you thrive. Welcome back. Before we took that break, I was talking to Tim, and I kind of planted a seed here. Most people will think of the practice of law as an adversarial activity. If you watch enough TV shows and whatnot, you'll certainly get that sense. But that's not really the purpose of law. Isn't to be adversarial. It's to be advocacy. You're advocating for a client. Howard Baker, I'm going to paraphrase this. I'm going to butcher in the paraphrase, but you can correct me here. But instead of being right about something, he said the other person they're right as well. So Rumi, and I'm going to mix a whole bunch of metaphors here, but Rumi said, out beyond right making and wrong making, there's a field. I will meet you in that field. Where does that come into play with the way that you have set up the culture within Baker Donelson, so that the adversarial nature of law doesn't predominate? The relational side of law and that collaborative, cooperative piece can come into play. How have you done that? Because I know you have.
Well, it's a great question because it's interesting because I could go, talk about in practice, how did I do that when I was practicing law? But I do think the key, I did love this idea of at the law firm. One of the first things I did, again, we had, some years of, folks had been getting a little bit disgruntled and we had been falling a little behind, like market pay and things like that. When I was in my 6-month transition, I went and visited all of our offices and had open town hall type meetings. And I wanted candid feedback. And I was listening and taking notes. And this was with not just the attorneys and the senior attorneys, staff, business services professionals. And then, I'm a copious note taker. The real challenge is then to come back, process it, and you can't, just because someone gives you feedback about something they would like to see you do doesn't mean it's the right thing for the organization. But in this instance, there was a lot of good ideas that I was open, I was curious to listen, to learn, and then we actually made some changes based on that feedback. So I think it's important to listen, but then also to act on the things that make sense. And I think that's something I've tried to carry through. We have now more virtual town halls, but I certainly go and visit almost every office every year between myself and our COO. We try to be in every office, do the same thing with getting feedback. But we have virtual town halls to get feedback. Next week, I'm doing a Ask Tim Anything town hall that all the staff and business services can come and ask questions. I think some of that, just knowing that their voices matter and that since they're in the trenches serving the clients, where now I'm really more at the leadership role of the firm, they're going to come into some pain points, some things that are making their life, harder that maybe we don't realize. There are some things that we can get rid of or clear up and make things more efficient. I think to go to your question about how do we bring in that people person part is to be open for feedback, and it can be constructive, it can be candid, it can be things. When I make mistakes, I want to be called out on it, and then we can fix it, right, if we need to. And I've done that sometimes. We start a new initiative and then we realize we totally didn't plan for this correctly. And so all of that, I think, builds into a system where people feel like that I am heard. I feel
Mm-hmm.
psychologically safe to be able to express that. And so that's kind of how I've tried to balance it all within leading the organization.
Yeah, I love that. That's yeah. I've got a short little reel up on Instagram right now that has. It went up I think 2 days ago, something like that. It's got 250,000 views on it right now,
Wow.
and yeah, and I'm going, yeah, that's what I did. I went, wow, and and where I'm going with that is it's basically just me talking about. You don't have conversations about relationships. The conversation is the relationship.
Right.
So, from a leadership perspective, the quality, tone, and tenor, as well as the content of the conversation, makes all the difference in the world in
Right.
terms of getting people on your side of the table, I would assume,
No,
even if
I
they have a
agree.
different perspective.
Totally agree. And I do think this plays into, even in the advocacy of the law firm, but something that I enjoyed, and I still do this to this day, is, Churchill had what he called dinner table diplomacy, or I don't know if he called it that, but that's really in fact what it was. He loved to get other world leaders, other people, opposition leaders, sitting around the table. Now he would get bourbon and smoke cigars and all that stuff, which maybe not my
My kind of
specialty.
guy.
Right, right, right. But I do think when you're around the table breaking bread and sharing things, you build that connection where this doesn't mean that people then drink the Kool-Aid and do everything you say, but they mean that they know me better. I know them better. I know where they're coming from. And whether
Mm-hmm.
that's around at a restaurant dinner or even sitting around a conference room with a team or an office and you're having bread, having food. But I did that with opposing counsel when I was practicing. We would go and just try to get to know each other. We're still advocating for our clients, and we may have to
Yeah.
go to court and let a judge rule on some issues. But I think knowing kind of where your adversary is coming from or what drives them, and particularly then their client, I think that helps a lot. So I think you're spot on, Blaine, and that's a good reason why people are doing that video clip. I'm looking forward to go look at it.
Thank you. You mentioned a little bit ago, and this is part of the story you told about your entry into law, so to speak.
Yeah.
But one of the takeaways there was the sense of resiliency that kind of came
Mm.
with what happened with that. The question I've got here from a leadership perspective has to do with the correlation between resiliency and clarity of values.
Mm.
So, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll
That,
just kind of plant those two things here in your own journey, but also the value structure, the value conversation as you lead your firm. What's the correlation that you can see, if any, between resiliency and allegiance to or clarity of core value?
yeah. No, I think they're directly connected. I think as an individual leader, I know what are sort of my North Star, the characteristics I try to live out. And then you take that and say, okay, we've got a vision for the firm that was not just Tim's idea, but was thoughtfully come together. It's what the clients had a voice. It's what they want. So now we're executing on it, and we may have some setbacks within that. But if we're confident that we're doing what that the clients want, what our people are bought into, and then again, it's got to align with your own North Star. I'm not the right person
Yeah.
to lead that effort. I think that does help to get up the next day when you stumble. There's I'm going to forget her name. There was a Bonnie Johnson St. Clair, I think, who was an Olympic skier in the Paralympics, and so she had lost a leg early in life. And she talks about how she was doing the downhill skiing. It was the last run, and she fell. And her first inclination is just, okay, well, I'm out of this. But she forced herself to get up and go ahead and finish the race. Well, it turned out that the person who came down and ultimately won the gold medal also fell but got up faster. And Bonnie St. John got the silver. And she said the only difference between us, she was a faster getter upper. And I love that. That's something that's a thing that I think about when I stumble, when I fall, when we have a setback. I've got to, I got to pause, got to understand, kind of reflect on what could I have done differently, what could we have done differently, but then can I get back up and drive forward again towards that North Star? So I do
Yeah.
think it's important for leaders and all of us that we know what those North Star, things that we're not willing to veer from. It doesn't mean that it's the exact right North Star, but if it drives you, then that is your North Star, right? Because people are going to have different views, different values. Like right now, we're in the middle of a growth strategy and really leading that and driving that. But if we determine, well, maybe we need to take the foot off the gas for a little while and pause and maybe retrench, well, I may not be the right person to lead that, right? It may be a different skill
Yeah.
set. So I think it is important to analyze that.
I love that answer, and I particularly like the faster getter upper.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, the only
and I
difference
mean,
between a gold and a silver was the resilience to get up a little faster. So,
yep. Yeah, and leaders cause movement. That's what they do, and
hmm
movement is faster getter upper.
right,
For the
right,
sake of
right.
what? Yeah, kind of where do you
Yeah.
move towards? Yeah, and folks that have listened to this show have heard me talk about this, but the idea of sustainable success in life, yeah, and that's I think what we all aspire to
Right.
at the end of the day is continual success. Earl Nightingale, and I date myself whenever I bring Earl's name into play here. Those of you that don't know who Earl Nightingale is, look him up. he was a profound force early in the 50s and 60s. But he was asked one time how he defined success, and he said it's the continual pursuit of a worthy ideal.
Mm.
And that pursuit of a worthy ideal for the sake of what? Is that ideal worthy of me? Now, we're gonna bring this to a close here, and I could talk to you forever around this, but the worthy ideal. You got Baker Vision 2028.
Right.
That you're working towards. If I, my cliff notes on this. What's the
Yes.
worthy ideal that you're asking people to aspire into or to live into?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking that because it was interesting. As you noted, we're kind of in the Southeast United States, mid-Atlantic. And so when we were first setting out to do a longer term strategy, a lot of it ended up being geography or, do we need should we become a national firm? Should we be regional, super regional? And we have people who have national practices, local practices, and we're all successful together. And so at first it was really becoming this, it was just not divisive in the sense like people were at each other, but it was just like we couldn't really figure out what was something that would unify us. So I went back to a simple premise. It's not new. Meister wrote a book 25 years ago about being a trusted advisor. But when I was listening to what our clients want, They want people to know their industry, know their business, are proactive in providing strategic help and advice. And that's really what a trusted advisor is, somebody who knows them and they can help them. And so the reason I landed on that as being the goal, that the noble purpose, the worthy purpose we're trying to strive for, is because it's also not just for the lawyers who have external clients, because we can build better trusted relationships within the firm, internal clients serving each other. And then if I can do something, and we have built in a trusted advisor talent academy type training so we can all get better at this skill. My whole noble purpose of what I'm really trying to drive is that all of us are getting better on something that is a life skill. We can be better trusted advisors, and really going back to this whole idea of owning our own purpose, our pathway, and being a better leader. That's what gets me up and drives it.
Yeah.
And it's the firm's been, it's led to some record years in the firm, because I think it's serving our clients what they want, but it's bringing engagement our people, because they're feeling like they're getting poured into as well, that we can all get better at this every day. So
I love that, Tim. I absolutely, yeah. What's important about a vision isn't so much the wordsmithing. It's what's important is about what does it make possible, and that's emotional engagement, trust in the clients,
trust in each other,
wonderful,
right?
and trust with each other. Where can people find out more about what you're up to, what the firm is up to, that sort of thing? What's the best contact way?
Yeah, I mean, I'm at bakerdonelson.com. I'm certainly there, and you can find me there. I've got a nonprofit I've started called Everybody Leads, and it's everybodyleads.org. I'm there, which is really all about bringing basic leadership training into underserved communities. And so I'm there, and I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'd love to connect and get to know you.
Great. Well, I'll make sure that these appear in the show notes, especially the everybodyleads.org. We didn't have a chance to go into a whole lot of detail around that. I'd love to have you come back on the show. I've got a couple of other shows that I think you might find useful and interesting as well. We do an Apple TV show, and I do a show every Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon on LinkedIn. It's live. So we'll look at.
I would love to
find a place to land you.
I'd love to just hang out and break bread with you, Blaine, like this. This has been really engaging, so I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I've loved having you on the show. I want a lawyer just like you. I do. Okay, folks, you've been listening to my conversation with Tim Lupinacci, CEO and chairman of Baker Donelson. And it's actually got a much longer name than that, but we're going to go with that one.
Not
to offend your other partners. Yeah. Berman, Caldwell, and Berkowitz. Berkowitz. There you go. Tune in on our next episode. BlaineBartlett.com is where you can find out more information about what I'm up to. There's also a leadership blind spot quiz that you can take. It's free. And that shows up on my my website as well. And just look for blind spot survey. You'll find it. And as always, my admonition to you as we close off here is find ways in your life to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. You'll find that your life works a whole lot better when you're giving things away rather than trying to get things. Okay? It's called generosity. Take care, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.